you see the
SouthCoast Matters. This is Julie Taylor, thank you, and Jean Fox.
and you're Paula Tender. So Jean's our guest today, and she's the South Coast Rail Project Manager, and we're very happy to have her here to talk about a very important subject.
Today we're talking about trains and cars and planes, and well, maybe we won't talk about planes, but we'll talk about trains and cars. Tell us about the history of this. It was about 25-year project that you've been working on.
Sure, Paul. Yeah, it's been around for close to 25 years. We've been talking about reconnecting the South Coast cities of Fall River, New Bedford, and all of southeastern Mass to Boston. We had trains that ran all the way from Boston down to New Bedford and Fall River up until 1959, when operations ceased to exist because it was not economically productive. At that point, as you recall, we had the interstate highway system implemented. People discovered they liked to get into a car and go places. They were still one career families, so they had one car. And
when was 24 finished? Was that about?
24 was the 50s.
50s?
Late
Okay.
50s,
Yeah.
and it was immediately obsolete. And so today it's obsolete to the fifth power. But anyway, so the project has been rekindled in the minds of many to make that connection again for a number of reasons. One is simply the linkage makes sense, where those two cities and Taunton are the only eastern Massachusetts cities within 50 miles of Boston that have no rail link. So, right away you've got environmental justice issues. You've got underserved communities that have no way to get into or out of Boston except by car or by bus. And the bus service, the buses sit in the same traffic you and I would sit on on Route 24, 140, any of them. 93.
Maybe we could get a link to Providence. If
You're pushing it, Paul. I want to get this link first. But that has come up, and I have a lot of calls from people on the Tiverton side of Fall River, on the other side of Fall River, that say, when is that train coming? Because we would really like to be able to get into Boston. There is actually pretty robust bus service right now to Providence, and they don't have the same kind of congestion except around the Washington Bridge during peak periods that we experience on 24. 24 can be congested any time of day except maybe 3 a.m.
I think part of our problem on the South Coast too is we're as much a part of the Rhode Island media market, probably more so than we are of the Boston media market. So when companies are advertising, selling products and stuff, they're going to go to Providence if they want to sell it to us. I think Boston recognizes that, so they have a tendency not to throw money down to the South Coast.
Well, in fairness to Boston, a fair amount of money has been coming our way, at least recently. And certainly the money that was poured into getting us through environmental review on South Coast Rail is, I think, testament to that. But you go to Fall River, the spaghetti ramps are down. That was the last stimulus-funded project in the state. And it's going to be transformative, already is, in Fall River. New Bedford had the maritime terminal constructed, and they're going to use that maybe not right away for offshore wind, but certainly for cargo. And they're an expanding harbor, their second largest harbor in the state. So we have that, and we have a lot of business parks that are developing all over, including right here in Taunton. Down in Fall River again, Amazon expects to begin construction next year on a distribution facility there. That's 500 jobs. So I think that you know, the private sector and the public sector get it. You've got over 750,000 people in this region. There's a great amount of talent here. It's just impossible to move people, or extremely difficult to move people. I was talking to several school superintendents who had gone to job fairs up in the Metro Boston area, and there were so many that really were tantalized by the prospect of coming to teach students in our region, and then they found out there was no train. So we lost talent, and that happens to us all the time. I've raised children who can't live here because they can't get a job that will help them pay down their student debt. And I am not alone. No. So these are all compelling issues, because once you have that link, talent flows both ways. Our talent can go to where the demand is for them, and other talent can come to where we have demand. And you just open up the pool of options for so many more people, and for our region, which is expected to grow to 900,000 by the year 2025.
So currently we're at
50-ish.
750-ish, we're going to 9. Most of it's not in the cities.
Most of it is urban, actually. Most of it's urban. New Bedford has experienced growth between the two last censuses. Fall River has not. Taunton has. Yep.
Could we bring up a slide? I had
Sure.
some. Could we bring up the at the end of the slides? I think it's last slide or second to the last slide.
We were reviewing the South Coast Rail corridor report.
The plan?
Yes. Now, has that been updated since it first came out, 2009?
Yes,
right?
the priority, yes, 2009, and we did a 5-year update. So it covered 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 on the priority development and priority protection areas, and we really did a good job of honing in on overlaying current zoning, current wetlands, all these things that the towns and cities had identified as priorities with other compelling facts, and we're able to nail it down. So we have an all new map, but it's pretty consistent with what we initially came up with.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
Yep.
the priority map. Well, we have a new one.
Keep going. I think it's 2 slides further down. Good. One more.
That's yeah. Well, cars.
Yeah.
We're going to talk trains first.
Yeah,
right?
we'll talk.
Okay, population.
Okay. And Fall River in 1920 had a population of 120,000, almost 121,000.
I'm sure.
In 1990, they were at 92,000, and then they went down to 88,000.
Right.
And it looks like they're still falling off a little.
Yeah.
New Bedford's, even since this, if they brought up 2 years ago, they were below the 95, and same with Taunton 2 or 3 years ago.
In 2000, they were down around 90.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah,
definitely on an upward trajectory, and Taunton clearly consistently growing. And Fall River has taken a dip. I think they're hoping with some economic development in the region that will change.
And
it should.
Yeah, the train will certainly change it.
Well, a
and-
train, yes, whatever we can do to attract potential employers. Certainly, we all know that we have tremendous resources in the region. The argument that we have to make to potential employers is that they need to take advantage of those resources.
There's so much talent in the area.
There is.
Too.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
It's enormous. So one of the things the South Coast Development Partnership is embarking on right now is a survey to potential employers. What are you really looking for when you relocate or expand? And I'm pretty sure that the rail link will come up as being one of those compelling issues, but I think other things are going to come up as well, and that includes our talent pool, what we have for real estate,
Yes.
affordable real estate. That's definitely going to rise to the surface. And then I think through that exercise, a lot of our employers will, or potential employers, will get to see just what we have. I'll be interested to see how that comes out.
Boston real estate and real estate around the interstates is really going up in the last, since the recession's gone up quite a bit.
Yes.
And real estate's falling off as you move away from the interstates.
Well, now the 495 belt is considered where the prime properties are
Yeah.
when they're within that. When you get without, what we have, what we offer Boston, if we have the link, is prime housing stock. So what do rental apartments cost? A 1-bedroom in Boston right now is $2,500 a month?
Yes.
Easily.
Easily,
It's
right?
crazy.
Probably more. You know what you can get for $2,500 a month here? Plus acreage. Okay, you have to cut the grass and shovel, but we have housing stock, and when Marty Welch talks about the challenges in the city of Boston, that's one of the things that rises to the surface every time. You're marginalizing people, we're gentrifying, which is all great because that's tax revenue, but what do you do with those people?
And where do the working people live?
Where will they live?
And especially when you have this new generation coming out of college, they're saddled with enormous amounts of
Julie.
debt. So how are they going to pay these high rental prices, plus put money away in
Right.
order to put a down payment on a house? So they may not even necessarily be able to afford real estate even down here where it's affordable.
That's true.
So around the rail stations
Right.
that are being developed and planned, they're also considering housing.
Absolutely. It's called transit-oriented development, and that's a zoning effort that a lot of the cities, pretty sure Taunton's in there, definitely Fall River and New Bedford, and several of the towns, including Freetown, around the stations they have developed zoning that encourages mixed use and walkability and sustainability. So the ideal is to live within a quarter to a half a mile from a train station, so you don't have to get in your car. And to allow for development around each of the stations that has your pharmacy, your grocery store, your the daily necessities that otherwise we have to get in a car and go get.
Right.
I lived in Toronto for a few years, and we lived about 15 miles outside of Toronto in Oakville. And within walking distance, I had a veterinarian, a doctor, chiropractor, drugstore, druggist, gym, supermarket,
Yep.
all within a few blocks.
Yep. That's anyone who travels down to Washington and Maryland and Virginia, the greater Washington area, will see that it is transit-oriented development. So the rail line is the spine, and everything around it has zoning that allows for people to walk, leave the car, not own the car if they don't want. Get a zip car if you need a car on the weekend. But basically everything you need is within walking distance of the station and wherever you live. So the mixed use includes residential units. And for example, one of the New Bedford stations has a real graduated approach to how they introduce the housing. So closer to the station, the 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, then condos, then single family homes, it progresses out. So, this is already something we've been very proactive on through the SouthCoast Rail Project, is making sure that this zoning is in place prior to implementing the rail, which in many, many circumstances is not the case. California, they don't do it that way.
How difficult is it to get the zoning in place prior?
Yeah, in the cities, not hard. In the towns,
Very high.
Yeah.
a very difficult proposition. Town meeting is a wonderful mechanism. It's absolutely wonderful, but it is difficult. It's a matter of informing everyone and making sure they're always on top of the latest and greatest that you're trying to present. City councils are in the weeds all the time, so by the time they get to vote on something, typically they're pretty well informed. Whereas in town, you have some that are very well informed and others that really need to be informed, and town meeting becomes the venue for that information. And so it can be hard.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the transit-oriented development is not getting support from people, maybe it's because they don't understand, but could it also be that it's a way that they feel they can defeat this rail project?
Potentially. They might say, well, if we approve TOD, which is what we affectionately term it, then it won't come. And a lot of people in the towns, particularly, are a little apprehensive about what the rail would bring to them. Are the population's going to explode? How are we going to support our schools and our public safety? All of these things are legitimate concerns that towns have. Cities don't feel quite the same opposition because they see it as a benefit, bringing businesses in, having more people stay rather than export our talent. So you go to Taunton, you go to Fall River, you go to New Bedford, and the cities are supportive of having this economic development and having people come to and from their cities. It's the towns, and some of them are quite rural in character. I mean, even though they're technically suburban, they feel rural, and people move there for that rural feel. So how do you preserve that?
Can we back up a bit? Ben,
Sure.
could we get a map? Could we see that map so Jean can explain?
We should probably talk about when they first proposed this and Sept, along with the consultants,
Right.
and went out to the towns
Right.
to begin the outreach.
Right, which they've done for a long time. this, like we've said, has been around for a long time, but part of the corridor plan effort was a community-by-community series of meetings. So 31 communities are in the corridor. They don't all have a station, but they're all near or at a station. And Sept took the lead on that as representing 27 communities. The others were also...
What's Sept stand for?
Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District.
Okay.
You were testing me. I know you were. I passed that one.
Pick it up a little bit.
Okay, sure. So Sept went to all these communities in the corridor. Here's the corridor.
We're trying to get a camera on that right
Sure.
now.
Okay.
There we go.
There's the corridor.
Yep.
Sept went to the corridor, went to all the communities in the corridor, and said, where do you want development, and where do you want us to preserve space? Where would you consider taking some space you've preserved and shipping it over into the development area so you can increase densities in some parts of town, but still maintain the rural flavor of your other areas in town? And that was how the corridor plan was born. And it has, again, since been updated. But the fact that there were 105 meetings in that first go-round over a period of very few months to develop a map that had this local input, this very important local input. You know, while this project is a regional project, each community has its own priorities. And each community should be allowed to voice those priorities and have them respected. And that's what this process
each
did.
community has its own fear of the unknown, too, which
Right.
is
So
always...
this was, that's right. And so this was also an educational process. Okay, you've got tracks going through your town. What does that mean? You know?
Yeah.
And going forward, what's going to happen most likely is there will be memoranda of understanding with each of the communities, so that when we get to mitigation, for example, they'll all have an idea, and the state will have an idea, so mutually, of what is expected locally and what we need for the rail. And how does that flesh out in terms of their, say, their master plan if they have one, or their open space plan if they have one.
How far down the line is that?
That isn't very far down the line. We need to get to 30% design. We're close to 15 right now, but getting to the next step, which is when permitting begins in earnest, is not that far away. So a year, up to 2 years, depending. But over the next couple of years, we fully anticipate starting these very in-depth conversations with communities. And they do it different ways. I think some of the cities tend to set up a committee of town hall people. But in the towns, you're probably going to want to have your planning person, your conservation person, your highway person. They'll sit down together and hash things out with the state on what it should look like and what their concerns are, and then it's all in writing. It's not foolproof, nothing ever is, but at least that local concerns are recorded and respected, observed, and hopefully a course of action to circumvent those will be in place.
Now, these are existing tracks, or
with the exception of one section, the section between Stoughton. So let's review. This is an extension of an existing line called the Stoughton line.
okay.
So what we're proposing is extending Stoughton south through Weir Junction, Cotley Junction, and Myrick's Junction, and then
Why
separating
don't you
out.
hold that up so?
Okay.
Yeah.
So here is Stoughton. This is where it ends right now.
Yep.
So we're proposing to extend down this way and then down the southern triangle to both Fall River and New Bedford.
Okay.
We don't have tracks now. We have berm, we have right-of-way, but we don't have tracks between Stoughton and Cotley, I think. It could be Weir. But there's a segment of the line that has no track right now.
Okay.
Back in 2010, we bought from here all the way down, so MassDOT owns all of this as well, and
Okay.
has actually done a lot of upgrading in that area.
Okay. Is this going to be a high-speed rail, or is this
No.
going to be? No.
This is going to be regular commuter rail, but it is proposed to be electric. So it'll be the
Okay.
first electric commuter line. There's a problem, I mean, we'd love it.
When
if
we say commuter line, we're talking like 50 miles an hour?
No, they max out at about 89.
Oh, okay.
All right, which isn't high speed.
No,
but,
not
and we
anymore.
would love to go high speed, except that we can only go single track in this region because of the wetlands and everything else, or we just can't do double track. So you You have to make way. And then the big problem is up in the Northeast Corridor, where you've got Amtrak and all these other lines converging. And so you kind of have to queue up to get into the South Station.
Yeah.
So now you said electric. Now, there was some discussion, electric, diesel.
Right.
So why don't you just let us know a little bit about
Sure.
the two options?
Well, diesel is what we have. All the MBTA commuter lines are diesel. So the feeling when we were first discussing this was then South Coast Rail should be diesel because that's what we have, and we like that we can interchange equipment. So if the Fitchburg line is having a problem with its equipment, we can steal South Coast Rail trains and put them over there, temporary fix. However, the Army Corps of Engineers was adamant that there's too much air pollution with diesel, and the reality is, as years go by, more and more commuter rails throughout the country, it's already all over Europe, but throughout this country, will be converting slowly but surely to electric. And that is an air quality issue, most of all. Several years ago, a number of years ago, the MBTA was ordered to turn their diesels off at night and plug them in to keep the engines warm during the winter because the particulate matter was spewing out all night. And that was clearly a problem with the air quality. So that's been rectified. They do, when they pull into their little layover facilities, they shut down the engines and they plug them in. We're not even proposing to go that route. The Army Corps has suggested very strongly and won't approve, have said they won't approve anything but electric for South Coast Rail. And then as we continue this project, I hope others
Will there
will.
be overhead lines to
Yes,
power this?
catenary. That's called
Okay.
catenary, and there were a lot of people that were concerned about the catenary. They find it a visual eyesore. The reality of catenary is it doesn't have to be. You'll still see lines, but you won't see this massive spider web of wires everywhere. And all you have to do is look around where they have electric in the country and in the world to see that it really. They've worked wonders on making it less
Will it be
unsafe.
dangerous to be near the track?
It's dangerous to be near the track right now, and I'd like to point out that anyone on the right-of-way at any time is breaking the law. You're not allowed to walk the tracks even when there's no trains. You are not allowed to cross the tracks even when you don't think there are any trains. That by law, the MBTA and the MassDOT rights-of-way are state property, and anyone on them is trespassing. There will not be a third rail like there are in subway cars,
Okay.
right? And that's what I think where you were going. All the power is in the overhead catenary and in the transfer stations along the route, which would be locked and fenced off, and you'd be,
Now,
like,
if I lived near that catenary, would I be sterile after 6 months or something like that?
gee, Paul, I don't think that was in my report, but I'll have, no.
Please check on that.
She'll
No.
have to get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get back to him on that.
Now, is the electric option more expensive than the diesel
Yes,
option?
absolutely. Electric is more expensive to purchase and implement, but over the long term is less expensive.
So now
Less
you-
cost to operate, less
Correct.
cost of operation.
Ultimately, but you're still going to have to train people. None of the MBTA operators have operated electric locomotives. We'd have to figure out the maintenance. So the state is looking at a bunch of different options on that, but this so far is electric unless.
How many people will be employed by the train?
I don't know per line.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question. We'll run 36 trains a day, or 38 trains a day. It's an addition of 6 on top of the current 32 trips that the Stoughton line already takes. So we probably don't need that many more engineers, but we'll need conductors, and there's been a big push on the part of the state to make sure that we have ticket takers on board, so the fare evasion issue goes away, or at least is mitigated. Get more people on the trains so that we can make sure we're collecting.
Is fare evasion really as big a problem as it's been put out there to be? I mean, sometimes these things become magnified.
Right, we
when they don't need to
awfulize.
be.
That's
so
right.
that's why I was just asking if it was
I've
truly
got
a
to
big problem.
I've got to tell my Canada story. On the trains in Canada, you buy a ticket, and then on occasion, I'd say maybe once every 40 times, there'll be a conductor coming around to pick up tickets. Once I saw somebody without a ticket,
Yeah.
and he got a lecture. He got one of these.
You didn't get the $200 ticket?
He might have, but he also got a lecture, and he was red-faced, and
Good.
yeah. So it's a different culture.
Yeah, it is, and I think we can certainly work on that. We do have a fare evasion problem. I mean, I've been on the green line in the city, and people come running in after me, and nothing infuriates me more than sliding my Charlie card and paying for the person behind me. It's wrong.
Yeah.
It's wrong. And it's somebody, maybe they get some thrill out of bucking the system, whatever, something free. But it's not free. It's your tax dollars that are supporting public transportation. We're all paying for this. So whoever is evading a fare is hurting all of us. And so I urge people to report it. But I do applaud the new focus to make sure there are more bodies on those trains, because some people said, I bought my ticket and nobody checked it. Because no staff person was around to see if the fare was paid.
Yeah.
So it's two sides.
Yeah.
So getting back to the electric, I had one other question.
Sure.
Interchangeability, you talked about that,
Right.
and how this would be the only line that's electric. Now, with everything that's going on at the MBTA, is the focus going to be to switch to electric, or is that just too much of a
Way too
mixed
much,
step?
Julie. Way too much right now. The focus right now is to get that state of good repair backlog fixed. So $7-something billion worth of work, and it's not going to happen overnight. As it stands right now with the MBTA, about $1 billion a year on top of what's already allocated to the MBTA to operate comes from all of us to support the T's operation, and unfortunately it didn't do well, and it hasn't done well, and more work needs to be done. The electric conversation is a scary one for anyone to have, because we know it's more money, but we do know, again, that there's this push nationally to really convert locomotives, or at least have them dual mode. So you could buy dual mode locomotives for South Coast Rail that operate on both diesel and electric, kind of like the Silver Line buses.
Yep.
And then they could be operational on other lines. They don't need different tracks. They don't, the other
Right.
infrastructure is the same.
Yeah, because I just know you had said, well, if if the Fitchburg line
Yeah.
breaks down, blah, blah. So now it's like, what if the South Coast Rail line breaks down?
Right.
What do we do?
What are we going to do? Well,
Yeah.
we would be stuck.
Now, are these going to be totally new trains? Just
Yeah, totally new locomotives is what we're proposing. There isn't, right now there's more coaches coming in, but when we get to the point where we're buying equipment, there's about a 5-year lead time. We would need to, the whole T system needs to be inventoried. They're fixing some locomotives
Yeah.
right now. And some may pass muster, some may not. And same thing with the coaches, the Hyundai Rotem coaches.
Okay. This is going well. I think we're going to have to do 2 shows and bring you back to do a second show. But let's finish up for this part.
Sure.
Big question. If I live another 20 years, do you think I'll get a ride on one of these trains?
If I have my way, you will, because I'm not giving up.
Yes, Jean is very determined.
Yeah.
She is very determined.
And tell us about Rail Board.
Rail to Boston Coalition is a privately funded, mostly business, some organizations. It's a coalition of people who are raising money to advocate for South Coast Rail outside of our region. They've hired a consultant who lobbies the legislature, lobbies the administration, and works very diligently at building awareness of the benefits of South Coast Rail to the Commonwealth overall.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Please tune in next week so you can see the second part of South Coast Rails on South Coast Matters. I'm Paul Latendra,
And I'm Julie Taylor.
and this is South Coast Matters. Thank you.